This is genius.
This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
I've never seen so many mullets in my life.
No, it's just about feeling good.
You had more chins than a Chinese phone book for a while.
Man.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah. I mean, he's right. He said, "Goonies never say die." We're going.
We got this.
All right.
I was pulling the trigger, but the safety was on.
I just Randy Black Eagle.
That's it. Boom.
That's my.
That's how we roll. Just drop the mic and walk away.
Hello, alright, you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen, home of gritty bow hunting films, interviews, tall tales, and a wee bit of manly boasting.
I'm South Cox, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
On this episode of Gritty Bowmen, I visit with Mark Kephart and Kevin Merrow of TradGeeks, TradGeeks.com, and the TradGeeks podcast. These guys have a passion for traditional archery, and I always enjoy hanging out with them. Currently, Mark and Kevin have some films in the 2016 Kuyu Film Festival. Look up Kuyu Film Festival and find their films and watch them. I particularly enjoyed their film titled 2015 in the Pro Long Division of the Film Festival. Go there and vote for your favorite film. But before you do that, sit back and join us as we talk traditional bow hunting on today's podcast. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowmen podcast. I am here with Mark Kephart and Kevin Merrow from TradGeeks, TradGeeks.com and the TradGeeks podcast. And I've been on their show before. I remember when I first started looking for a hunting podcast, a bow hunting podcast, I couldn't hardly find one. But you guys were out there and you had some great shows. One of my favorites was when you guys interviewed Donnie Vincent. Really enjoyed that podcast, and of course you have TradGeeks.com and you have a forum there where a lot of traditional bow hunters can go to get advice and tips and links to help them transition or get into shooting traditional bows.
Absolutely.
So. I wanted to have you on the podcast today because I'm kind of, Aaron's been shooting a traditional bow and I've been kind of going down that road a little bit, toying with it. And I just, wanted to talk to you guys, just get your opinions on some things. And for all those guys that are listening that aren't into traditional bow hunting, this podcast may not be for you. But at the same time, maybe you might want to pick up a stick bow and fling some arrows the old-fashioned way, and maybe you don't hunt like that, but maybe you shoot just for some fun. So speaking of fun and whether or not it's fun, if I'm not really concerned where the arrow hits, I have a lot of fun shooting trad bows. If I really want to hit the center of the target, though, there's a little bit of I get a flyer like every now and then or all the time. So anyway, so I got a bow from Bob Smith at Big Stick Archery.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob has been a friend of the show, and he's really into the podcast. And so he's like, "Hey, I'd just like to send you a bow for having a killer show." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I get the bow. He sent me two. I got to send one back to him, but to pick from, and one of them is a takedown, and one of them is just a full bow.
One piece.
And so a takedown, is one that for guys who don't know, what's a takedown exactly?
A takedown's just that, basically. It's either 2-piece, 3-piece, the majority of the time, and basically easier to pack if you want to pack it somewhere. The only reason to have it. In my opinion,
the limbs unscrew.
Yeah,
right?
So you could change the weight and limbs and stuff like that. For me, I leave mine bowled up all the time anyway, so it doesn't make that much of a difference for me personally. But
so like if you're flying something like that, they're a little bit nicer to deal with because you can take them down. It's not 60 inches or 58 inches completely packed.
And some guys like the feel much better of a takedown than a one piece. So, there's some variety there as well. But
what about you? I mean, what do you think between the feel of the two?
For me, I love them all. Like I'm very adaptable no matter what. I like a lot of different bows. One piece takedowns, it doesn't really matter that much to me. I do have a one piece longbow that I always go to. I just love that bow. But then I have, super curve recurves as well that I like just as much. So depending on the circumstance, if I'm hunting whitetail or if I'm hunting turkey, I'll pick one or the other. If I'm just going to 3D, I'll pick a different one because I have that option. But I love them all. I really do. The less gadgets it has, the better for me. And some feel much better. Like my one-piece longbow, there's a little tiny hand shock in there. You feel the bow much more when you shoot, but I like that. I like that feeling. So
okay,
after.
Because I shot them both, and I preferred the takedown. It just felt the handle's a lot thicker.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems a little easier to shoot, less hand shock. It just seemed a little faster.
Yeah.
The other one, the single piece, the one piece, is really pretty. They're both really pretty, but I don't know. I liked the takedown more.
Yeah, the thing I like about mine being a takedown is when I started out, the first recurve bow that I owned, I traded a guitar for, and it was before I didn't know anything about it. Mm-hmm. And it was 55 pounds at 28 inches, and I was a little bit overbowed as far as practicing form and getting into it. So this one I ordered, it's a stalker stick bow I ordered from South Cox, and it's 47 pounds at 28 inches. So I'm a lot easier, and I only draw 27 and a half-ish. So I'm not drawing the full weight, but it's a lot easier to practice consistency and to practice form and to repeat that over and over again without tiring out. But down the road, if I want to go up in weight, all I have to do is order new limbs. So I'm not kind of locked into that weight. If I wanted to go buffalo hunting, I could get heavier limbs. Even though the right setup, you could probably kill a buffalo with a 47-pound bow.
Yeah, and Mark's situation there was he had this bow before he really knew anyone into traditional archery. He met me, already had the bow, and he's like, well, what should I do? How should I get in? Normally, I'd recommend, hey, go get a 35-pound bow, go get a light setup to start to practice good form. But he already had it, and I'm like, just get some arrows, man, start shooting. And that's what he did, and it's worked fine for him. But ultimately, if you don't have a bow yet, I would start out lighter, favor on the lighter side.
Okay, because yesterday when I was shooting, so I was at XXX Archery, and Corey Miller, he just got back from Texas where he shot a javelina with his stick bow.
Sweet.
At about 20 yards. He drilled it. And so we go there, and then he shoots his bow, and he shoots these tight groups with the recurve, with my recurve, in fact, which was annoying. And then then I take my recurve that I got from Bob, and I'm taking the shot. And he, by the way, he said I was a sissy if I shot without bare fingers. So I shot with bare fingers. And after like the fifth shot, like I got this, I must have popped some kind of blood vessel because the end of my finger swelled up like a purple sucker.
Yeah.
And I got this monster bruise. I'm not sure what I did. But then I just shot through it for like 50 more arrows because I'm tough like that. I'm real gritty. But no, it was fun to shoot the bow. And it was cool because I'm like focused. And what I found is when I got to full draw and I'm holding it back, and Corey gave me some kind of quick lessons. So as I'm holding it back and I hold it, and then I let go, and I'm really steady. That arrow kind of hit. I got some good groups.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were times where I pulled back and I was just not really concentrating. And that arrow would go 4 feet up to the right. I mean, like, I'd hit the wall. I mean, badly. Like, there was some... It's not like it's a little miss. They were major misses.
Yeah, with traditional a tackle, if you want to say that, to me, you have to be in the zone. You can't be thinking about anything else. And that's why I love it so much. I mean, and it's probably archery in general, but you have to be so focused with everything to shoot consistent groups. Mark and I were out before the podcast shooting a little bit, and he was flinging a few here and there, and so was I. And I was just like, we just got to concentrate, stop gabbing, and let's focus. And boom, our group's tightened right up. So that's the majority of it. I mean, you really got to be zoned in, and some days you're just going to shoot bad, and you might as well just quit and don't even shoot. And
I'm too stubborn to quit. I just keep shooting. But it's a thing where you practice that form and you practice that shot sequence and the rotational draw using your back muscles for your release, continuing the motion. You'll get to your anchor and you want to pull through that with your back tension. But it's something that you do that so much and you practice that year in and year out, where guys just shoot that instinctively, and it's where you can be talking. Kevin shot great while we were talking, and he just shoots. He's consistent. He's good, a lot better than I am. He's been doing it a lot longer. But it's guys that have done it. It's like riding a bike. The longer you ride a bike, the better you are at balancing on it. Like guys that do tricks on a skateboard, the more you're on it, the better balance you have because you're used to that feel. And that's where it's almost like an art form sometimes, or like playing a musical instrument. That muscle memory comes into play.
Well, and you mentioned today too that he doesn't feel comfortable shooting in front of a lot of people right now because he's still learning. It's his second year, and some people just don't feel comfortable shooting in front of people, and I totally understand that. So if you're just getting into it, you want to pick someone that can educate you on the subject, but you also feel really comfortable shooting in front of, because you're going to shoot bad. I mean, that's just it. So if you don't feel comfortable in front of them to begin with, you're better off shooting by yourself.
Yeah, that's not a struggle for me. I embarrass myself on a weekly basis to millions, to lots of people. I'll get through that. But I do like to, when it comes down to getting competitive, I do like to have at least a slight chance. But this I'm gonna need some work here.
It takes time. I mean, it took me at least a month, 2 months before I felt like I could hit any animal, to where I was confident enough to be like, okay, 20 yards, I can put my arrow on the target. When I started out. And it's something that, and over the winter, after hunting season, I think it was 2 or 3 months that I shot maybe 2 or 3 times, because my wife and I moved to a new location, and I just kind of put the bow on the shelf, had a daughter, she's 6 months old now. But when I went back out to shoot, it's like, holy crap, I shot terrible. And even at 15 to 20 yards. So just to get that consistency back has been fun. But if you aren't frustrated at all, I don't think you're you're shooting a trad bow.
Yeah.
Because it gets frustrating.
I'll
sometimes.
tell you, what I like about it is it does make. I mean, this is going to sound really shallow and everything, but it just makes me feel manly.
It does.
Pull it back, and there's like all this muscle involved, and it's like, and you get it back there, and you're like holding it. And I'm sitting there, and part of me is just like, how long can I hold this? Like it starts to shake a little, and it's like, the compound. I'm drawing my compound afterward, and I'm holding it. I'm like, I don't feel so manly. I just feel like, under control, but.
There's nothing like it until they can trash it all they want. Until you do it, there's nothing like it. And once you carry a stick bow into the mountains or into the woods, and you take that big piece of metal with the wheels and cams, and you're just like, there's just no comparison. I mean, there's none whatsoever. You have to be ready for it. You have to be willing to give up a lot for it, but you also gain a lot with it.
And that's just to go into a little bit of my background too, is I didn't come from a compound background. My family is gun hunters, 100%. Family hunting camp, we'd go up, and the family, we'd put on drives for whitetail deer. My hunting season was the first day rifle season, and typically would be successful. We just knew where the animals would be moving based on other people moving. Did very well hunting, had a lot of fun, but it wasn't it was a passion of mine because it's in your blood. You love doing it, but it was a kind of an afterthought. It's like, yeah, we're going up to hunting camp on Saturday, Sunday, Monday we'll hunt. If we get something, go home Monday night. That was hunting season for me. I traded that guitar for the stick bow, and I've hunted in the past 2 years more days in the woods, more time in the field, and been less successful.
Yeah.
But I've had more fun and have more memories and more experiences because I'm putting myself out there. And I don't see myself ever going back.
I can see myself walking around with a stick bow and doing lots of small game hunting and shooting just for fun and whacking stuff, and where there's not as big a stakes for me. But right now, and it depends, right? It depends on how well I shoot, how often I can spend shooting. And I see myself really using it to blacktail hunt as well from a tree stand, because I can perfect, the same distance, like a 20-yard shot at a certain angle. I could drill that in, so I can make that shot every day. Not so sure, varying ranges, varying angles, I get how well I'll be able to get good at that. But it would be a lot of fun to do all of that. But at the same time, when it comes down to elk hunting, and I put all this time and energy and effort into it and all that, and it's hard enough to get to bow range on an elk as it is, especially a big mature bull. I'm just not ready to do that with there's a big part of me that just wants to kill animals.
And there is nothing wrong with that. And I think a lot of people's perception of trad guys or traditional archers is, and there's nothing wrong with those guys. There's the old guy that if you hunt any other way, you aren't really hunting.
It's like fly fishing and spin fishing. So I fly fish, but I could care less if you spin fish. I'll spin fish all day too. I don't care. And it's the same with trad. I'll never pick up a compound again, but I'll go hunt with you any day of the week with your compound. Like, I don't care, but there's guys that are diehard trad. Like, if you're not shooting trad, you're in the wrong category. And that's why I started TradGeeks in a sense, because I switched from compound to traditional archery. I saw a movement being created, and I did this 5 years ago, but I saw that I made that transition and how much my life was affected by it, that I wanted to be able to share that with everybody and have a place where people could come and have that traditional and compound gathering, where guys could get along. It's happening for sure. But yeah, you don't have to be all or nothing. That's the fun of it,
Yep.
Yeah. Well, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes guys make when they first start getting into shooting traditional bows?
Being overbowed like I was, I think, is a huge one. Because guys will start
what if you're just buff like me? I mean, it's like...
Well, that's a different situation.
I remember hearing Snyder talk about, walking in, going... Yeah, he picked up this bow, this really, and he goes to shoot. He's like, yeah, nope, that ain't happening. Not with that.
For me, I think the biggest thing would be their expectations have to be, you have to be willing to not kill every time. You have to be willing to let some animals pass that you could, drop with a compound easily. Your ethics have to be up to par in my standards, or in my eyes. So if someone's jumping into it just because other people are doing it and they're like, oh, he's doing it, I can do it, you might want to slow down and really think about that process. But other than that, I don't think there's, other than what Mark said, being overbowed and not perfecting form, I don't think there's anything that I would say negative, towards traditional archery or, regrets, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What about, like, where can a guy go to learn how to shoot?
There's pretty much traditional groups in every state from what I've gathered just off my forum. We don't push our forum too much, so it's not real active just because we're into the podcast and the films and stuff like that. But pretty much anywhere you can find somebody that's into traditional archery if you look hard enough. You know, your local bow shops would probably know guys that do it. Every state has bowers. You know, there's so many different bows that you can choose from, and to guys making their own bows. My dad makes a couple of his own bows that would kill animals. You know, so in my eyes, you know, other than online in my eyes, and we're trying to start to get into that, doing more. We're going to start putting out more videos and how-to videos so people can get on and just follow me. Not saying I'm right, but have one perspective and go with it. Where like, on Facebook and stuff, the forums, I see so many guys they'll post a video of themselves shooting a stick bow, and there's 500 comments and they're all different. That's not helping that guy at all, in my opinion. So, you know, you're better off going with someone you trust and that is successful and just sticking with what they're doing. And then as you get better with traditional archery, then taking some other opinions. But you could get overwhelmed really easily with it. It's
one of the best advice that I could give to, that I was given very early on by Kevin, was shooting a trad bow can be either as complex as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be. And I had a funny story of the first arrows that I shot. I had that 55-pound recurve bow. It was a Bear Cheyenne, so a nice bow. And I went on Cabela's.com because that's where
this was before he met, before
I knew Kevin. So I go on Cabela's.com.
I wouldn't have recommended that.
And because that's where you get hunting stuff from a guy like me that doesn't know anything. Yep. And I look for traditional arrows, and I find there were aluminum arrows designed for a longbow. Well, I figured longbow recurve doesn't matter; they're traditional arrows. And so when I looked at them, they had ones that were good for 70 to 80 pounds. And I was like, oh, well, I'm shooting 55 pounds, 70 to 80 pounds. I'm not going to break that arrow. It'll fly. That'll be perfect. So I ordered those arrows, and they were 31 inches long, way too heavy. And they flew out of the bow like that. And Kevin said it can be as easy or as complex or as simple as you want it to be. So at 10 yards, I practiced for that month before turkey season, and I was able to get my groups into a pie plate with those arrows, and had a really, really cool turkey hunting experience with that setup. That I missed a turkey at 15 yards, and I shot, it wasn't even my up and down, it was my left and right. So it was user error, not the setup didn't have anything to do with me missing. But that experience was just awesome, not knowing anything about it. Yeah. And so you can do that. But if you can find a mentor, go to a local bow shop and ask around. There are a lot of, for every, I think, trad guy that's anti-helping other people out, or that's kind of stuck in his ways and it's his way or nobody else is right, there are 1,000 guys out there that are willing to help you out. And so it's just connecting with them.
And another perspective, and why I kind of gave Mark that advice of just jump into it. Like, he was ready to do it. He wanted to do it. At that point, we weren't that close. I said, just, get some arrows and start shooting. And he didn't have anybody to guide him at that point. So we started turkey hunting together, and that's what he had, and he hunted. So I don't want to discourage anyone because they're uninformed to get out there and try it, especially with like turkey. And if their groups are decent, go do it. And then within a couple months, I had him shoot what he needed to be shooting, and he was dialed in, and we were tuning in his arrows, bear shaft tuning, and we had him really lined up. But I feel that a lot of people might just get discouraged just because they don't have somewhere to go, one-on-one, and they're just reading stuff online. Mark and myself are both like all-in type of guys where if we're going to do something, we're all in, where you're more like, even with you're talking with compound, and you want to dabble with it, but you just don't want to go all in, where I was just all in. He was just all in. So if you're somebody like yourself, you just take the time to research the stuff. It's out there for sure.
Well, I'll tell you this, that when I first started looking at doing certain lifts, when I started doing some workout stuff, fitness stuff, I was looking at the how to do a squat, how to do a deadlift, later how to do a power clean. And I would get online and I would try to Google and find stuff, and I'd find YouTube videos, and they varied, you know, and there were some videos I was like, oh, that's how you do a squat. And I'd watch another one and a guy would teach it completely different. And so there's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad information out on the web. So for me, I found guys that could lift that I trusted, people that I thought were reputable sources, and then I watched their training and instruction on how to do a lift. And I'd watch their YouTube videos and their instruction videos, and I could learn it, and then I'd go home and I would try it to do the same, repeat the same movement, do some exercises. Then I'd have my wife record me doing it with my iPhone while I did the squat, and then I'd replay, and I could see where I was making mistakes compared to the video I was seeing on YouTube, and I could start perfecting my movement, you know, seeing where I was doing things wrong. So, and I actually have got very good at all the different lifts and even the snatch. I got fairly good at those, teaching myself at home with video and practicing. But you only get so good. And then at that point, I got to where pretty much I kind of pushed it as far as I could go with some of these lifts. And if I wanted to get better, get the movements down better, I needed to go and get some one-on-one instruction.
Absolutely.
But I must have spent probably 2 years working on just the basics that I knew were wrong, or the mobility issues I was facing, or how some of the positions I knew I wasn't getting into properly. I was able to work on all that at home by myself for a couple of years.
Yep.
And then once I got to the point where, okay, I'm not going to I tried very hard not to learn bad habits, you know, from the very start. And that's a big deal to me. And that's one of the reasons I haven't shot a trad bow that much, is because I don't feel like I have really got the instruction or have the reputable source to learn how to shoot yet. I don't want to develop the bad habits. I don't mind starting out and working on some pretty basic stuff that I think is right up my alley. If I have someone one-on-one that can help, that's ideal, of course, if they're reputable and they know what they're doing. But still, I'm of my experience tells me that I can learn a lot about shooting a trad bow without ever leaving my basement. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I'm trying to do on my website. And I don't want to sound like I'm telling everyone to just dive into it. That was how we handled Mark. And I have another good friend, Mike, that is as anal as they come, and in a good way. I mean, he's by the book. Everything has to be precise and perfect. If he can't do something to the extreme, he won't do it. And he wanted to get into traditional archery. He got a 30-pound bow. We worked up to 35 pounds. He came over every day. We worked on his form, and he was very successful with that, to the point where he shot a doe with a 35-pound Samick Sage, which is a really low-end recurve, passed through. You know, she went 20 or 30 yards, and he was ecstatic. But he did everything the way that he wanted to do it. And I recommend that if you're that way, you know, and because you will develop bad habits, and I'm sure Mark has, but that's just how he did it.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to discourage anyone depending on how they are.
Well, and that's what I was leading up to. It's like and I think I found a few videos, a few people that have a pretty good idea on how to shoot and are teaching some lessons. I know that you guys have had Ryan Sampe on your podcast before, and Ryan has some videos, and he's done some with South or on South's website in the past. I've seen some where he teaches some shooting instruction. Are there any other videos online and guys that you've watched that you recommend to people?
Yeah, there's a fella named, I believe his name's Arnie Moe, and he is on YouTube. He's an older gentleman that is like a level 3 Olympic instructor. And he's been on my forum, and he's big on tradgang.com as well, which is a huge traditional archery forum. So I got hooked up with Arnie through my forum, and he's helped myself and Finn, my son. He's gave me instruction on how to guide him through, shooting a bow at the age of 2. So now he's 4, and now he's telling me new things to do with him. And, I'll shoot him an email here and there, and he's always responded, always great advice. And, with my background, I'm health and anatomy and physiology and all that stuff. So I would debate with him, and he'd crush me every time, because he just knows his stuff that well, put me into check and made me realize a lot about form and things you should focus on, from the get-go. So I'd highly recommend looking him up on YouTube, and you shouldn't have a problem finding him. So,
because Aaron has been shooting for a while now, Snyder, and he got some one-on-one instruction down there at Rocky Mountain Specialty Gear. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And from the Clums, and he's Clum Senior, and Aaron's shooting very good. But from this very, very start, he's received some really great instruction, and a lot of the bad habits he may have needed to unlearn, he doesn't have to unlearn.
Yeah,
right. Never got him in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. At the same time, though, I also look at this. When a guy starts playing basketball as a little kid, right, and he starts shooting hoops and all of that, you see it all the time where a kid comes along and he can just drop the threes like crazy, but it is the ugliest shot you've ever seen, right? Nothing about it looks right, yet he can repeat that same movement with accuracy over and over and over again. And you look at another guy who has like textbook form, and and he shoots fairly well too, but maybe not as well. So, I mean, as much as I say, I want to focus on the most ideal shooting style or whatever, or one that is conducive to accuracy. At the same time, I realize just time behind the bow and instinct is going to have a huge role as well.
Yep. And that's a huge difference between instinctive shooters and gap shooters, per se. Gap shooters, they pay attention to where their arrow point is, and when they're practicing, depending on the distance of the target, they'll have that arrow point be kind of like their marker as to where to hold their bow so that they're accurate out to that distance. And when you get out 40 yards or you're taking a 50-yard shot, that helps a lot. But purely instinctive shooters just rely on their form, and they look at where they're shooting and burn that hole in the target. And it's not just flinging arrows, it's paying attention to form, but
they all go hand in hand, though. I mean, even the gap shooters have to have great form.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's just, not to disagree with you, Mark, but that's just a different style of shooting. But in my eyes, everybody has to practice good form. And without that...
Dude, why?
Yeah,
okay. Why? Let's hear it.
Okay, so if you don't have good form, like everyone makes that correlation, like basketball, and this is just my opinion. You take a basketball and you shoot and you make all kinds of baskets, but you're still in relative form, right? You're not shooting hook shots. You're not doing this from the 3-point line, just wherever. Yeah. Same with like this, they relate it to quarterbacks. Oh, quarterback's going back. He throws a bomb and he's putting it right where. Yeah, but he has the receiver going to it. I think archery's so much more precise. It's like, I mean, you can't put those in the same spectrum in my eyes. There is instinctive, but you're not going to draw to the hip at 30 yards and put it where you want to.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're basically getting, drawing like the way you picture an Indian shooting a bow, if you just have that basic form, I would argue that that's close enough to like the form that.
Well, if you're repeating the same thing consistently, you're practicing form. You're practicing your shot sequence.
Right.
Your shot sequence is going to be different than mine, is going to be different than Kevin's. Where we anchor, our actual draw
You're
length.
going to have the same 3 basic things that you need. Your T-post, your back tension, your alignment, everything. You have to have those basics.
Yeah.
But to get really precise out past 25 yards, things have to be spot on. I mean, it's just a different level. And I feel when you start out, it is like that. It is, it's not that hard. I'm relatively where I need to be. But that small group expands drastically as you go out in yardage. And the littlest things make the biggest difference. And like Mark will even attest that, 15 yards, we're about the same. 20 yards, we're about the same. We get out past 25 and his groups go like this and mine stay. And that's just me having my form dialed in compared to him right now.
See,
To say someone with bad form could do that, maybe. There are those freaks out there that just... But
when I started out, I went turkey hunting, and I felt really good about me shooting at 15 yards with a horrible setup, with a horrible arrow selection, with a horrible type of broadhead. It was not a good setup. The bow didn't shoot well, and I could still put a group in a pie plate at 15 yards and felt really good about what I was doing. But when I got to 20 yards, 25 yards, I couldn't hit the target consistently.
See, I remember being a kid and getting a bow, and I remember walking around and I shot it every day out to 30 yards. I remember shooting even further just for the heck of it, and it was like a Robin Hood, long.
Yeah.
But I remember walking around, and I shot that for like 4 years, but I shot all the time to the point where, and no one taught me. I just got a bow, and my dad's like, you pull it here, here's some finger tabs, and you kind of do this. And at first I started gap shooting a little bit. And then I remember, after a while, though, I just got to where I just kind of knew about where to hold it. And this is a kid who's walking around all over in the woods behind my house and just shooting all day long, all the time. And it got to a point where, I just hit what I was aiming at most of the time. And then, I hang it up about 14, and I got a compound, and then never shot a recurve ever again, or a stick bow style bow. And so I wonder, when you talk about form, I read this book years ago called Land of the Spotted Eagle by Luther Standing Bear, and he's a Lakota Indian. It's a cool book, but he talks about how they were raised, and the young boys would get these bow and arrows, and they would walk around in the plains. He's a Lakota or a Sioux Indian. He'd walk around in the plains, and they would shoot locusts or grasshoppers, and as he's walking through and they go to fly in the air, they just draw and shoot. And they'd spend days and all year growing up, you were shooting grasshoppers as they flew. And that was their kind of thing, right? Didn't really explain that they got a lot of instruction. They just got these toy bows and were off, right?
Yeah.
And then by the time they're older and, they're just dead accurate, they're just hitting everything.
And I see that side of it, like I do. I myself, if I didn't have to work every day, I didn't have all the other stresses, and I could just hunt, just do that, I think I could probably get to be just that instinctive where I was just unstoppable. But I have so many variables. I can literally go a whole week without shooting, pick up my bow, and I'm not far off of where I was the week before. And I owe that to my form being consistent and having the same shot sequence. But then there's my son. He knows nothing. He was 2 years old. I taught him where to anchor, and his form's better than mine. But he never had anything to disrupt that either. And that's kind of Mark, he never even shot a bow before. So I just kind of let him develop his own form to see how far off it was. And I didn't have to adjust much. It was pretty pretty close.
And for 2.5 years, I shot just about every day. And at the end of hunting season last year, and continued shooting until we made the move and things. And my wife and I moved, and we had a little girl. And so I went about 3 months without shooting. But I was shooting very good out to 30 yards. Pie plate every time. Felt really good out to 30 yards. When 3 months later, I go to pick it up, and I don't shoot very well. I'm not shooting as well as I did back then because I wasn't in the habit of practicing that shot sequence.
So you're shooting more on feel than technique, and so when you get out of feel, your
Right.
shot goes downhill. Where Kevin's shooting by technique and executing good form. So when he goes back to it, you're more or less
exactly
still shooting the same, even though the feel is maybe not there the same.
Yeah. And why I like that is because I'm a hunter and I shoot to hunt. I could care less if I win any 3D tournaments or anything like that. But when I'm in my tree stand or shooting at game, the last thing I think about is my form or anything I did. I literally draw back, pick my spot, and it's off and it's through the deer. And I'm like, what just happened? I don't remember anything because it's so ingrained into my head that like I can stand out there and talk to Mark and still be precise just because I practice that. When I'm not with anyone, that's all I think about is my form.
Yeah.
That's just how I do it, and that's my perception of it. But I could be wrong.
I spoke to Aaron. He was on a podcast, talking about his little trad journey, and he said that when he shoots his bow. I asked him, well, do you snap shoot? Do you just draw and release? He said he forces himself to draw and hold for a count of about 3 seconds and then shoots so that he can execute the right shot. And he's like, maybe someday I'll be able to snap shoot. And I've seen guys that do it and you're like, holy cow, how they can reload and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. But he's like, I'm a long way from that. And if I try to shoot like that, he's not accurate.
Yeah. And if you go back to the book that you were talking about, there's a huge difference because that guy had a bow in his hand his entire life. They shoot every day. So that's more like I've got a daughter that's almost 7 months old that can't walk right now. You and I can walk very, very well because we do it every day. It's the same as playing a guitar. I've played guitar every stinking day for about 17, 18 years. And I put it on my lap and I play. I don't play the same way that other people play. Everybody is different. But it's when you're in that repetition, culturally, growing up with a bow in your hand, if you shoot like Finn is, if he continues shooting as much as he's shooting, when he's 30 years old, he is going to shoot circles around what I can at 30 years old. And that's why for guys that are getting into it, to try and get better faster or try to improve upon that, because you can't take back the time that you didn't spend with a bow in your hands. You can't go back and spend more time on it than until we invent a time machine, which would be awesome.
I mean, I think a lot depends on your goals too. If you're a wing shooter and you're out trying to shoot birds out of the air and, just messing around with it, it probably doesn't matter that much to you. But, we could get into a big debate on how far we should be shooting with our trad bows too. And in my perspective is I'm going to shoot as far as I'm confident at shooting. So if that's 90 yards with a trad bow and I feel confident at it, I'll shoot it. That's probably unrealistic, but that's my mindset is like I'm not limited in myself just because of my bow. So I'm going to try my best to get as good as I can, as far as I can, just in case.
And
but
when we went out west, South Dakota mule deer hunt 2 years ago, I felt good out to 30 yards, and that was where I would feel comfortable. Kevin felt good and could shoot better than I could at 30 yards. I was kind of that kill zone at 30 yards consistently, 4 out of 5 arrows. So 30 yards was kind of my range that I wanted to be in. He could have shot 45 to 50 yards because he was dialed in at that distance.
Yeah.
So
And without that form,
Well, that's what I was going to say.
it's tough.
I mean, there's a part of me that so you can spend a lot of hours out there flinging arrows, trying to get better. And I guess what I'm kind of driving at, as we just kind of talk about this from all these different angles, is I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, I could just shoot so much that I finally I dial something in and it feels right. I can just keep shooting and shooting and shooting and eventually it'll feel right and get better. Unfortunately, I'm not. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, we're not Lakota Indian boys, and we didn't grow up with recurves in our hands, and we haven't been, knocking locusts out of the air since we were, kids, and so, the time involved in that is dramatic, like you were saying, Mark, and so. That said, if I'm going to spend time trying to get better at shooting a trad bow, and I'm starting where I am, you can't go back. If I could go back, I'd keep my hair, but you can't go back. You got to go out and you shoot, and if you're going to practice, to me, you can. The guys who get better, like at the Olympic lifts, for example. If we take that, there are guys who go to the gym and just lift. And they lift more, and they lift more, and they lift more, but they don't practice. So I think there's a difference. Like they think they're practicing because they're just doing it.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people can fall into that, not just with trad bows, but with traditional
everything,
with recurves, whatever, or compounds. It's the same thing with Olympic lifting. You could fall into that trap where you just go and you just keep quote unquote practicing every day, but you don't actually work on what's broken or improve your form.
Yeah, and I like to state it as like practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And that's the way I like to think. I think that's kind of what you're getting at, right, Brian? Is you got to focus on those things when you are practicing.
And so you don't really know what to fix though if you don't know what's broken. And so that's why I like to watch some videos, some training, some instruction that's out there, and then from there, like I said, videotaping yourself. Everybody has a phone now. It's not I remember growing up, we bought a camcorder at my house, and it was like a major event, and we recorded like Christmas morning, and it was like, holy cow! Now everybody's got one on their phone, dude. Everyone has to look. It's amazing world we live in today, and so recording yourself on a shot sequence. And then breaking it down and seeing where that's better practice to me than just shooting and shooting and shooting. Identifying, and having some goals on things you want to fix. I know when I was first shooting a compound and I wanted to become a better shot with my compound. I remember reading Randy Ulmer in a magazine, and he was talking about how he would do some blind bail shooting. Or people have different names for it, but where basically he'd stand in front of a target with his bow, with his eyes closed, and he would just shoot and feel the release, let the kind of be surprised when that shot goes off, using some back tension, pulling through, and by not aiming and by having his eyes closed, he didn't develop some bad habits that come from trying to. Keep the pin right on the dot or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I went home and I started focusing on some of the movements and the positions that he said to get into, and I started doing that and shooting arrows, and I did it for like a month with my eyes closed, didn't bother targeting at all. And then when I went and started shooting at the range, it was like this new movement pattern and behavior had been built into my shot that was like perfect. It was more about the release than it was the aiming. And then all of a sudden I was shooting really great groups and got a lot better at it. And so I think there are a lot of things that we can do as you get into, whatever it is, whether it's Olympic lifting or shooting a traditional bow, where, you can work on little things and put this and chunk them up and then put something really nice together.
Absolutely.
And get a lot accurate. One of the questions I had is, let's say you do have really solid instruction. You do work on it all the time. I mean, what's the average guy? How accurate does he get, and how long does it take?
That's funny you mentioned that, because there was just one when you interviewed Joe, and he said to Aaron, "What, you don't want to kill anything? You don't want to be accurate?" That just like, I was like, ah, I was so mad, just because I feel that you can be really accurate. Everyone's going to be different, and everybody's perception's different. In my opinion, Mark's mentioned pie plate a lot, and that's not sufficient for a lot of people, especially compound guys that are used to really, really tight groups. A pie plate isn't, they're like, no, I want my groups to be a lot tighter than that. To me, I base it off of tuning. So speaking of Arnie Mill again, he once told me that don't even worry about starting to tune your stick bow until you can shoot a softball size group at 20 yards. So that's like a coffee can, lid at 20 yards. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's what I based mine off of, is once I started shooting at consistently 20 yards, I started tuning my bow. So now I expect that,
Sorry, scoot back from the mic. It's blowing the recording. It's a little too loud.
Okay. So now, is that better?
Yeah. I'll edit that out, but go ahead.
Not a problem, Brian. So now for my distances, I want to be in a softball size group. That's my ethical shot range me.
At what range?
Depending on
whatever range you're at,
I'm at, I want to do a softball size group. That's my group. It could be different for everybody else, but he mentioned that that's where I should be for tuning. Mm-hmm. And if you can't shoot a group like that at 20 yards, you might as well not even tune, just because you need to work on other things before you start tuning your bow.
And for me, it all depends on what I'm hunting. If it's a white-tailed deer, that kill zone is about a pie plate. So for me, I want to be able to put every single arrow I shoot at whatever distance in that kill zone. Mm-hmm. So if it's an elk, my kill zone is going to be bigger. Mm-hmm. Not that I'm going to be comfortable. I still am going to want to put it in a pie plate at whatever distance I'm shooting at. I'm not going to, if I go hunt an elephant, I'm not going to be comfortable taking a 100-yard shot because I can put the arrows in a huge kill zone. But for me, that pie plate has kind of always been my kind of standard for myself. Yeah. And that's, ethics are different for every single person. There's some things that are consistent, I think, or should be consistent for everybody. Obeying the game laws, making sure you're using a setup that can ethically or can kill the animal that you're hunting in a short amount of time when you shoot the arrow properly. But there are guys with guns that got shot deer every single year. I mean, there are guys that run their car into a deer every single year.
Yeah, so I think that when it comes down to that ethics stuff, it's like you just got to be good enough at your, you got to know what you're good at.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm all for taking a shot that I think is fatal. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm going to do.
But getting back to that question, if like to be more precise, I think that you can be extremely accurate with it. My buddy Aaron can shoot, lights out at 40 yards. I mean, you're talking golf ball size groups with his stick bow.
My question is, how long does it take to get that proficient? I mean, of course, everybody has a different aptitude, right? And it's like not everybody is a Michael Jordan. Not everybody's an elite athlete. Not everybody is going to be Tim Gillingham, right? But your average guys, I mean, excluding the guy with 2 left feet, I mean, what is the average time it takes for a guy to get pretty good with his?
I personally think it all depends on the individual. I don't think if you're dedicated to it and you have some sort of background in archery, if it's compound or whatever, and you're somewhat coordinated, I think you can be extremely accurate anywhere from 2 months to 5 years. That range,
Dude,
I'm in it.
2 months to 5 years? Come on,
Yeah,
brother.
I mean,
That
it all
doesn't help
depends.
me at all.
Look at Aaron Snyder, for instance. He's shooting really good, from what I can tell. Right?
Yeah.
I've been hunting with a stick bow. I mean, I dove all in, so I've been hunting with it regardless, and I felt confident. But I'm getting better every year, and now I'm 5 years in and shooting better than ever. I base it off of my 3D scores. So like we have an indoor 3D league. I work on my form in the winter, and we shoot 30 targets. Our range that we shoot at, they're out to 40 yards. So we shoot basically the same targets as the compound guys do. And out of 300, I'm shooting in the 240s. So that's averaging an 8 on every single shot. So to me, that makes me feel very confident,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I base it, and the average targets, I'm not kidding, are 30 yards at that range. So they're pokes. They're not the traditional, ASA 25 and under type of targets. But it depends, man. I mean, Mark never bow hunted in his life, and he's been hunting with it ever since.
Yeah, that first summer it was 3 months, and we went to South Dakota, and I killed a mule deer, and then came back to Pennsylvania and killed a white-tailed doe. So
you can do it.
Yeah.
But then my buddy Mike he hunted with a compound all of his life. He's very anal, wants things precise. I mean, there's nobody more precise than him. As ethical as you could be, does not want any question. He doesn't want to wound anything. That's just how he is. He told me it was going to be 2 years before he started hunting with his trad bow. He hunted it with it that same year just because he got confident, and he went out and killed 2 deer with it. No problems,
So and that's kind of what I was driving at. Is it's basically it's not that unsurmountable. It's you can learn it if you put some time into it. You can learn it fairly well to proficiently enough to be able to hunt.
Yeah, but he won't listen to us anyway, so I'm not afraid to. But my brother-in-law, he's hunted with a compound, all of his life, and he shot my trad bows. I'd put him on like the 5-year spectrum. Like he just, that's just him. So everybody's different, but
yeah,
I mean,
well, there's it's certainly fun. I'm looking forward to trying a few more bows, and that was my next question. I've shot this bow from Big Stick Archery. I've shot some recurves, like a PSE recurve, and a few others. Some bows that Aaron mentioned, a whole litany of bows that he's shot. And my question is, what bows have you guys shot? What are the differences? I think the bow, before that, though, what are the styles? Because there's a recurve, there's a longbow, and there's a deflex, reflex longbow, which I think is what I've got. What's the difference? Does it matter?
It's all based on feel, really. They say recurves are faster if you're into like the speed stuff. But nowadays, with some of the technology or just modifications that they made to longbows, I have longbows that shoot just as fast, if not faster, in some of my recurves. But it's all based on feel. I'm a longbow guy, and it took me a while to realize that.
And why is that?
I have a poor release, so I pluck a little bit. I twist a little bit. My release is just bad. Not bad, but not up to snuff. And a longbow doesn't have that flex laterally in the limbs. It's more stable. Mm-hmm. So it's more forgiving for me when I shoot my longbow. So I'm more accurate with a longbow than I am my recurve. With that said, now I have a Z4 limb made by Zipper that's backed on the belly, and the back is carbon. And it's a super curve, so they're extreme curves, and you can barely get any twist at all laterally with it. And I shoot really well with that bow too. So the more lateral stability the bow has is better for me because of my release. And then the length of the bow too. So the longer you go, traditionally speaking, the more accurate it is, the shorter.
The more forgiving.
Yeah.
And that's my problem. I shoot a 52-inch recurve bow, so it's
You're not going to get as you probably could, but it's going to be harder for you to get as accurate as somebody with a longer bow.
Got it.
I would think, but
I'm really short. I'm 5'7", and it's just comfortable for me to have a shorter bow.
So what's the story with the reflex deflex thing?
honestly, I don't know too much about it. The traditional longbows, the limbs don't have any deflex in them at all. Now they're making kind of a hybrid that has a little bit of a deflex in it. Just more power stroke, I bet. Just a little faster probably, but
Mine
That's
feels
all.
cool. The one that I've got, it feels cool. I mean, when you shoot it, and it feels fast. I mean, but Aaron was telling me that he's shooting the Hoyt Buffalo, and it has the carbon. What do they call those?
Quattro.
Quattro limbs or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've had a few people send me emails and messages saying they've shot that after they heard Aaron talking about it, and now they want one because they're really smooth, really easy to shoot. What's the story with the carbon in the limbs? You said Zipper had some. What's the deal there?
I don't really know too much about like the specifics on it. I believe that it's just because you can get more of a curve, so you're getting more of a power stroke there. They're going to be a little faster, smoother probably. I shouldn't even speak on it because I really don't know the details, but the bows that I do have that have the carbon either on the back or belly just seem to be a little smoother for me. I've shot the Buffalo. It's definitely a nice shooting bow. I couldn't even tell you all the different bows I've shot. Now I do want to mention, if you're getting into traditional archery and you're from like the eastern states, Eastern Traditional Rendezvous, it's up at Coudersport, PA, Denton Hill. And that it's like the world's largest traditional bow shoot. So they have 9 or 10 3D courses set up, and then just a pile of vendors. And South's been there a few times. I got to shoot with South, and just you can just go and shoot. That's what's cool with the traditional world. It's not like the compound world where you go to these rendezvous and you say, hey, can I shoot that bow that's brand new? And they're like, oh, here you go. And you go out and shoot it. And you come back and, hey, can I shoot that bow? And you go out and shoot it. Or you're with your buddy, hey, here, you want to shoot my bow? Like, it's not like, oh, I don't want you to shoot my bow,
Well, and with the compound, if the draw length isn't for you, it's kind of really awkward. If it's too short, too long, you don't really get a true sense for it. But with a stick bow, you just draw it to your length.
Yeah, as long as you're not, like my buddy can't draw some of my bows because he's 31-inch draw or something like that. But
that's one of the cool things. I'm not real technical when it comes to it. Like we talked earlier, I've only been shooting. This will be my third year of hunting with a bow. Period. And one of the cool things about that super recurve, the Z4 limbs, is it almost feels like you draw more early. It stacks early, and then as you get out, it feels like it tricks you into thinking there's a let off almost.
Yeah, so it compares to the Border makes a limb like that. Morrison makes a limb like that. Now Zipper makes a limb like that. There might be one other one. Anyone listening, Border would be like the closest to the Z4 limb. But the super curves so much that it's loaded, so the preload's really, really stiff. So instead of it stacking when you draw, like 1 pound or like whatever it starts with, the weight increases as you draw. This is the same draw the whole way through. So it's like 2 pounds every inch the whole way back. So since it's so heavy up front, it actually tricks your mind and it opens up for you. It's like an extreme let off for you.
Right.
So it's pretty sweet how they work. But
and I shot Kevin's and absolutely loved it, and I have to get one.
They're extremely, and not that it even matters because we're talking traditional now, so speed shouldn't even be a topic really, in my opinion, because we're getting back into technology, but I like it. So, and you can get a flatter area. You can shoot longer with it. That's why I got the limbs, so I can shoot farther without a big variance. But I'm shooting like 205, 210 with that bow. So it's zipping them. But
So what about like shooting with bare fingers or not bare fingers? Because I was accused of being soft when I shot with bare fingers. What is your take?
I think that's horrible advice. I really do.
Thank you. Because that took a little fun out of it. I'll just be honest.
That's exactly it.
After I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, it was not a big deal, but there was some initial pain for about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I've went from the glove to the tab to the glove to the tab, back to the glove to the tab. Now I'm at the tab and I'm not going back. But I played with it for so long. Everybody's different, but I've never used just bare fingers, because
it's a preference thing. It's like shooting split or 3 under. It's what you're most comfortable with. I started with a glove because that's what I had, and I shot a lot. And then when Kevin and I started shooting, he let me try out his tab, and I was like, oh, that feels a lot better on the release. So now I shoot with a tab.
And it's so much like I shoot 2 fingers under, and I was shooting up at Denton. South's like, are you shooting 2 fingers under? And I'm like, yeah, you should try it. And he's like, all right. And he tried it. And he's like, I don't dislike it. And he actually shot well with it. He's like, I don't dislike it at all. I'm not going to do it, But the reason why I did it is my poor release, my 3rd finger had too much pressure. So they're saying like it should only have maybe 20%, 30% pressure on it. And I just had too much on it. So by getting rid of it,
Just less drag,
tension.
less tension, less. Yeah.
So now I'm 2 fingers under, and I'll never switch. But
I got to admit, for pulling with 3 fingers just makes me feel tougher than 2. 2's like a dainty pull. Like 3's like
actually, it's the opposite.
It is, but
3,
but it just doesn't feel like you got your fingers dug in enough. It's like
what you should do is sit on the ground
strong.
and put the bow between your feet and pull it back with both hands. Then you could pull like 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Honestly, when you draw with 3, it doesn't feel like as much weight. There's more stability in your wrist, and it's probably more like even Arnie said, it's more stability in the muscles. So it's better. But for me, I like 2. I feel comfortable. 3 now feels like I have too much on the string. Yeah. If I could get away with 1 finger, I probably would. But
cool. So what is what are some of the bows you really like that you recommend? What are some bows out there that are
I'm a wood type of guy, or wood riser type of guy, so I don't really like the metal risers just because I want to be in the traditional standard. It doesn't really even
just
matter.
say it. You're an elitist, and that's all that matters.
Actually, I do want a metal riser just for like bow fishing and stuff to bang around, but I just like the wood feel. So
that is absolutely like I was getting some arrows from those Black Eagle vintage arrows. They look like wood, but they're really carbon, and I think they're carbon. Pretty sure.
Yeah, I shoot Easton Axis traditionals, and they've got the wood grain look to them, but they're a carbon arrow.
Cool, man. They're hand crested and painted and everything, and I'm like, they're just cool. The arrows are cool.
Yeah.
Like I want to display the arrows in my office,
Yeah.
But
back to the bows.
Yeah.
I've shot a lot. I like Zipper. Zipper and Stalker are probably my 2 number ones. South makes a smooth shooting bow. I mean, you can't get any smoother in my opinion. Zippers is right up there with probably the same as smoothness, and this is just my opinion. Smooth. Performance is probably up a little bit on the Zipper in my opinion. But South's finish then on the bows are just, I mean, if you want a pretty bow, South is the guy to go to as far as,
they are pretty.
I mean,
and you can get a pretty bow that shoots well. There's a
There's a
misnotion out there that if your bow looks pretty, it's not going to shoot as well, but that's false.
Yeah,
you can get a lot of performance out of a.
And Bill's bows are beautiful as well. There's just a lot of bowers out there that make beautiful bows, and I've shot bowers that I've never even heard of, and they shoot great. But again,
I've heard about Black Widow.
Black Widow makes a nice bow
Aaron,
too.
I think, was saying was he shot some of those, and He said it was
Wasn't for him.
Wasn't for him. But he said it was very pretty. What else? Black tail.
Black tail makes a pretty bow. Not for me. Just wasn't.
Yeah.
And you'll get that with everybody.
Then I run into a ton of guys who it's like they're shooting a bow made by a guy in their local town.
Yeah,
that's like gorgeous and nice, and it's like, yeah, he just makes bows, and it's like, huh. So there's like big scale guys, some smaller ones, but I've only shot a handful at this point, but they don't all feel the same at all.
Right.
Like there are some real differences in the feel.
It really comes down to personality, and for me, I like that. I like to feel that bow, and I'll pick up a bow and like, oh man, that hurt. That was terrible, but I liked it. I really like. My dad made a couple long bows now, and we'll shoot them in the yard just for fun, and they'll break your wrist. They're terrible, but I want to use it. Like I want to hunt with it. Just because there's that connection. So. If you have that with somebody, it means a lot too.
The bow that I got from Bob that I've been shooting from Big Stick Archery, it feels cool. I mean, it's pretty. It draws nice. The release feels good. I mean, I like that. It's a nice shooting bow. I don't have a lot to compare it to, but it's nice to have one. It really is nice to have one.
You really get stuck in like and I'm on the zipper thing is I'll go to Denton Hill and shoot 40, 50 different bows there by different people, and they don't compare to my zipper. I just like my zipper. Yeah.
Same thing happened like when I've shot my different compounds, and I've gone out and I've shot my buddies like, you have got to shoot this blah, blah. Oh, yeah? Okay, yeah. And I get my hands on it, and I shoot, and the first thing they're like, isn't it awesome? And I'm going,
no. It's all right.
No, pretty much there's nothing I liked about it.
It's the same as rifle guys and scopes, or gun manufacturers, or the caliber of rifle that you use. Like there's some, exactly.
Yeah, everybody's a little different, and it's funny. I was at the bow shop yesterday shooting a few different compounds, and they have different feels. And there's some, and part of it I'm guilty of is just I'm comfortable with what I've shot a lot of. Mm-hmm. So I'm used to the draw cycle and the release on a certain bow versus another. Not that one's better than the other. It's just one I'm very familiar with, and one is an unfamiliar feeling. Yeah. Had I started with the other bow, I would probably think the one I shoot now is awkward.
Yeah.
Skiing versus snowboarding.
Yeah, you could shoot a bow
that's hands down. Snowboarding's better. There's just no discussion there. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not even a valid example.
It's what you start with, though, because I know some people that can't snowboard worth crap that tried to, that started out skiing, that say snowboarding's the hardest thing in the world to learn. And I know some people that the opposite think skiing's the hardest thing in the world that started out snowboarding.
I started skiing and then snowboarded.
Really?
And
I'm a snowboarder too.
You just kicked butt snowboarding?
Well, the first day I spent the whole day on my butt, and I crashed into a few people. There was one guy. I just went over this little kid skiing. That guy's dad was so mad at me, but I couldn't turn. It just was all I was trying to do is stay up. So yes, but I hear what you're saying.
And then on the other hand, you could shoot a bow that feels absolutely horrible, but you shoot it well. I've had that too, where I've shot bows.
Aaron mentioned going to this thing, drawing the bow, and then the arrow just goes right where it should go. And versus he grabs another one and it's high and to the right, and he has to compensate kind of where he's holding to get it to fly where he wants it to. And he's like, one of the things he recommended was shooting the bow that actually flies where you think it's going.
Mm-hmm.
But
I have that one piece zip stick that I have, and that's why I just always go back to it, because I can just pick it up and it just hits where I want it to every single time. I've never really narrowed down why. I'm starting to think it's just how it's cut to center. So like some bows are cut more to center than others.
Yeah.
And for me, I like a bow cut more to center. And for whatever reason, with my vision and the way I shoot my bow, it goes to more where I want it to versus one like. And Finn was the same way. When I first got him a bow, it was a long bow. It was just a cheap long bow, cut to center. And he hit everything he was looking at, shooting stuffed animals in the house, just crushing everything. Well, then I had South build him a weasel, and it's not cut straight to center. There's a bigger shelf. And that kid struggled for months. And he was shooting left with it only because that shelf.
Yeah.
And as soon as I brought his shelf plate out and made it more to center, then he started nailing with it. So I think that has a lot to do with it, that you just don't think of it, when you're picking up different bows to shoot. So that could be something to look into. I could be wrong too, but
I mean, I drew back and I really expected to hit dead center. I mean, it was a little naive, but it just sort of feels awesome. You pull back, it didn't go center. Let me tell you. And but it wasn't bad actually. There were sequences where I had pretty tight groups, but
You mean you didn't have a wham sauce moment?
yeah, I mean, I said wham sauce. I said it. It didn't really help the actual shooting, but I used the word. It's important. But no, when I got good groups, but they weren't going to center. Well, with a compound, I would just move my pin, right? I like the release. I like how it feels, right? Everything feels good. Well, when I'm shooting consistent groups with a recurve, but they're low and to the left, now I've got to sort of figure that out.
yeah, and that's all tuning. I mean, that's your area tuning, and you can. I mean, how I do it is I bare shaft tune my arrow after I can shoot a softball size group.
Okay.
I don't care if it's where it's at, as long as I can shoot that group consistently. Then I'll go into my tuning, which I just do bare shaft tuning.
What is that? How do you tune a stick bow?
Okay, so this is how I do it. I'm no professional, but I'll take, like I shoot Easton Axis. I'll get them at 31. I think they come in 31 inches.
Yep.
So I'll cut. I know, so I'll cut them down just to 30, just to go with that, and I'll start shooting. If they're hitting left or right, that's left I believe is stiff, and I get these confused all the time. I have to look it up. Left is stiff, right is weak, I believe. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But you cut a 1/4 inch off and you shoot it again until that arrow is hitting where you want it to hit. I don't pay attention to if it kicks out to the right or left too much, just because the feathers stabilize that enough that it's good enough for me. So I just take a 1/4 inch off to where that arrow is spined correctly for me. And then you have to know which arrow to start with also. So that depends on your draw length and your poundage. So like for me, I draw roughly 53 pounds at 28 inches, and a 500 spine arrow works well for me. If you go to so that you got to know that parameter as well to start, and then you start cutting that arrow back
To make it stiffer, basically.
Yep. So even though you might have an inch sticking out, where like a compound, you want it to be right there, right? For the most part is what I've.
But doesn't that just change maybe the tightness of your groups, not the actual impact point?
No, I mean, if you're stiffening the arrow or weakening the arrow, it's gonna. I'm worried about my left and right here. My up and downs, I'm not worried about with this. So as you go, if you shoot it originally and it's too weak, you're cutting a little bit off. Okay, so if you're starting out and it's stiff, then you need a different spine. Okay, so if you're shooting a 500, you need to go to the 400 if you can't cut anything off because it's already too stiff. So that's how I do it to stiffen it up. And then when I'm hitting my left and right where I want it to be, then I'll adjust my knock from that. We need to do a video on this. It's so hard to explain over.
And that's because when your arrow comes off of the bow, it's not just shooting straight off.
You're getting there flex.
The arrow has a paradox, so it has to correct that paradox.
Just like alpha compound.
Right. So if it's too stiff, it's going to end up in going one direction. If it's too
So then after I get that dialed down, then I'll adjust, and I'll just throw in the point weight that I really want to shoot to start. From what I've found with carbon arrows, adding weight up front or taking it away doesn't affect the spine all that much. Compared to a wooden arrow, it's drastic. With a carbon, it's not that much that you're really going to know a huge difference.
Okay.
But then after you get that all dialed in, then you can start messing with the strike plate. So a thicker strike plate, a thinner strike plate, softer, harder strike plate will also affect the stiffness of that spine or the weakness of that spine.
What's a strike plate?
The strike plate goes against the riser. So you got your shelf material, which the arrow rests on, and then the striking material that's on the side of the riser. It can be leather, it can be Velcro, whatever you would if you don't use any, which affects. I mean, if I'm hitting just I always get these confused, but I believe if I'm a little. I'm not even going to say. I think if I'm weak, I make it softer, the strike plate. So you can adjust that next to affect the spine. And then the last place I'll go to is my brace height, which I don't like messing with. So your brace height, you want to shoot that bow to where it feels the best and performs the best. It's kind of like a sweet spot. I compare it to when you hit a baseball and you hit it on the sweet spot of that bat, it just feels amazing. You'll kind of feel that with the brace height, adding twist or untwisting it to adjust that brace height. So that can affect it as well because of the power stroke, right?
Yeah.
So if you got it dialed in and you just want to fine tune it a little more, which is taking it to the next degree, you can add a twist or two. But I don't like to do that. I like to address it, with the other stuff first. So if you're shooting great, you have that bow tuned and you're shooting for weeks and it's shooting great, and then just one day you just fall apart, you always want to check that brace, because if it's off, a quarter inch, you're going to be off big time. But
got it. So, but you're saying you can mess around, and until you're getting softball groups at 20, you don't need to mess around with all the rest of that stuff.
I would personally, because
there's no point.
There's no point. Exactly. If you can't do that at 20 yards, how do you know what you're doing with the tunings? You don't know anything, really.
You don't know if it's helping or hurting you.
So a lot of guys jump into that way too soon, in my opinion, only because they're not shooting good enough to begin with.
Okay.
So that's a generalized rough. Now you talk to Ryan Santape, and his tuning's he is detailed oriented. I don't get that involved with it other than what I explained.
Yeah.
But I get true flight. My arrows are bullets going out of there. I don't have any concerns there, with penetration. So
Yep. Can we pause for a second? I've drank like 3 cups of coffee and a bottle of water, so I kind of need to hit the head.
Well, I think we're ready to wrap up. Let's wrap it up, and then we'll just. Is there anything we want to say, like right there at the end?
Sure.
Okay. Parting words? No.
It's been fun.
Okay. Ready?
Had a blast talking to you, man.
Okay, hang on. Well, all right, guys. I want to thank you guys for coming on the podcast and sharing all your information, your passion for bow hunting and traditional bow hunting. And where can guys look you guys up, find you?
Yeah, you can go to our website. It's TradGeeks.com. Facebook, TradGeeks. TradGeeks Mark.
Yep, I'm on Instagram at TradGeeks Mark and Facebook TradGeeks Mark.
Cool.
Yeah, no, our podcast is on iTunes and on our website as well. So,
do you guys have that on Stitcher or any Android?
No, I don't think so. We just have the RSS feed, so you can plug it in. But I don't have it on Stitcher. I should, but
you guys, no, but people can stream it right off of your TradGeeks.com website, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
The audio version.
And I do want to mention, if I misspoke on it, I'll probably get hammered with emails about how terrible that was.
No,
that's what I do.
That's the thing about the Gritty Bowman podcast is we're just talking about what we know. And if we don't know at all, that's fine. It's like, you're sharing what you do know at the level
Yeah.
you know it. And there's a lot of us out there like me where this is very pertinent. It's very helpful. There's a lot of guys out there, of course, that are way beyond this level of discussion. And for them, they may be going, you know what? This wasn't the best information. But you know what? That's okay. This is where it is for me. There's a ton of, like, I've thought about this a lot with my own podcast. It's like I don't know it all, but what I do know, I'll share. And I might be wrong, but it's what I know right now.
Yeah, and, our objective is just to increase somebody's learning curve. I mean, luckily I had a good friend that knew it all. I mean, knew everything he's taught me, and he knows a lot more than I do today.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't know these things, because I text him and I'm like, is left stiff again? Is right weak again? Is it soft or straight plate? Like, that's what I do.
Yeah.
And he always has to remind me, just because I'm not good with keeping those things in my brain.
And I'd just like to say, for anybody out there that has even the slightest notion that you might want to shoot traditional or you might want to try it out, just try it out, because nothing's going to hurt from just trying it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. No big deal. Yeah. There are millions of people out there, and most of you should at least try it, Yeah. And I'm living proof that you can definitely do it. Because if I can shoot a coyote at 20 yards in the dark on my way to a tree stand with a stick bow, anybody can kill anything.
That's for sure.
That's awesome. All right, guys. We'll end on that. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks,
Brian.
Buddy.
Stay gritty, guys.
You too.
You too, man.
Okay, gritty friends. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. If you did, please take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher. We love reading your reviews. And connect with us on social media if you're on there. Look us up on Facebook and Instagram, and take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can receive notifications when we upload new videos. We've got a sweet deal with Mountain Ops. You get 20% off on all Mountain Ops supplements, combo packs, and apparel when you type in the word gritty at checkout. If you're a hardcore elk hunter, or you want to be, go to the Elk 101 website online and check them out. Our friend Corey Jacobson is killing it with some of the best elk hunting information and entertainment on the web. If you haven't heard, we're doing a huge gear giveaway to try and grow and expand the gritty community on Facebook and Instagram. I asked a bunch of friends to pitch in on this gear giveaway, and they all came through with some awesome stuff. Our friends at Kifaru, Rockslide, First Light, Phelps Game Calls, One Shot Gear, Mountain Ops, Triple X Archery, Blacktail Outdoors, and Is It September Yet are pitching in some sweet gear for the giveaway. We'll announce all the details in the next few weeks. All you have to do to be entered to win is like our Gritty Bowmen Facebook page and follow us on Instagram. All right, friends, let me leave you with one other quote from Theodore Roosevelt, who said, "It behooves every man to remember that the work of the critic is of altogether secondary importance, and that, in the end, progress is accomplished by the man who does things." We all have a choice. We can be people who do things or people who criticize the work of others. It's pretty simple, really. Get out there and do your thing. Good luck on your hunts, and stay gritty.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowmen.
Gritty Bowmen.